Hey guys, what's up? Hope everybody's having a good day, and thanks for taking out a couple minutes of your day to check this video out. Much appreciated. And today's is sort of a commentary cross tip type of thing, because I think you might be able to take some what I share with you guys here today and learn a lot about, especially about bass behavior and movement, which basically what I want to talk about today is a study that was done probably about 15 years ago, on how bass move, bass behavior, bass movement. And I think you'll find this really interesting, as far as might break some preconceived notions about what bass do. And dragging a little bit this morning. Last night Elijah got sick. He was his daycare, a bunch of kids came down with some type of stomach bug, so he was up throwing up all night, and I've been like awake all night long, sort of dragging a little bit. But anyway, bass behavior and movement. I think a lot of people have sort of a misconception about how bass move and how bass behave. They tend to lump bass together into big groups, and they have a broad generalization of what they do. For example, they say, oh, bass in the wintertime, they're deep, then they move shallow in the spawn, then they move deep in the summer again, then they move back in the creeks in the fall. And too many times I think bass get sort of grouped up, and people think in terms of big populations of fish doing the same thing at the same time, and that's not true. Bass are individuals just like people are. They have personalities, they have different moods and behaviors. And one of the most interesting studies I've ever heard, this was done probably 15 or 20 years ago. There was a group of fisheries biologists that tagged 3 bass. I think it was on one of the eastern Tennessee lakes, like Douglas or Fort Loudon, something like that. And they were going to monitor these bass to see what their movements were for like a 6-month period. But all these bass were like, I think they were they were 3 to 5 pounders, something like that. They were good quality fish, mature fish. So anyway, in the first sample group, we'll talk about the first one. Then they track these bass like daily, their daily movements for a period of 6 months. The first bass that we'll talk about, bass number 1, they were all released from the same spot. You know, they were caught on the lake in various positions. They were all released in the same place. Bass number 1 was released, and it swam to the right down the lake towards the dam area, approximately like 75 to 100 yards. And there was an underwater log down there, like a large underwater log in like 4 or 5 foot of water. And this particular bass stayed around that log for 6 months. It never moved. It just stayed. That was its territory. That log was its ambush point. It stayed there. It lived there. It fed in that area there. You know, didn't range, but a couple 100 yards away from that log. But it always would return to that log. Territorial. The second bass that they covered, it went down the lake, I think they said 3 or 4 miles, and it made periodic stops. It would stop off on a piece of riprap for a couple days, then it would move to a dock for a couple days, and then it would, swim down the bank just roaming, and then it would hang out by some stumps or logs for a few days, and eventually it made its way 3 or 4 miles down the lake. But its territory was fairly broad. It moved, within a couple miles of the particular area that it sort of honed in on, which was about, like I said, 3 to 4 miles from its release spot. But it obviously found some suitable habitat in that area, had a pretty broad range, a broad territory. The third bass that they had, the third one that they watched, it swam over 30 miles up the lake, and almost like in a beeline, like swam, in a course of a couple days, it made it up like 30 miles away, and it got up there, and it got back into this one bay off the main lake, and it basically just roamed this bay, for, the entire period of time that they're monitoring these 3 bass. And, I find that incredibly fascinating. It's like, okay, you've got 3 bass that are basically sort of at the same age group, 3 to 5 pounders, and every single one of them was different. I mean, every one of them had the same options within that lake to take advantage of, but every one of them chose a different option. And I'd be curious to know, why is that? Is Is it the fact that some bass are like people? Some people like to live out in the country. Some people like, a nice suburb. Some people are city dwellers in apartments. Everybody has a different mood or personality, and I really think that's the same way it is with bass. I mean, from my experiences I've had in the water, I see no rhyme or reason a lot of times to bass behavior or movement. A lot of times, especially bass movement at certain times of the year. I have caught bass throughout the course of a year's time in situations that most people think they're going to be in, and situations that you never would think they would be in. I've caught bass on top water in 43 degree water before. They're not supposed to hit top water in 43 degree water. I mean, I've caught bass in jerk baits in 95 degree water with 4 inches of visibility before. They're not supposed to bite lures like that. So, and then you hear people catching bass out of 80, 90 foot of water, and then at the same time, you hear people the very same day on the same lake, some guy will be catching them on a whopper plopper in a foot of water, so every bass is different, man. It's just like, that's one of the things you might take away from that study a little bit, is that, when you're talking and putting together your game plan and trying to figure things out, sort of rest in the fact that there is a ton of options out there. There's bass doing literally everything at the lake at the same time, which is comforting to know that you don't have to hit on just the right thing to catch a fish, because there's always a lot of different ways to catch them from what I've seen. Most tournaments, if you guys follow tournaments much, you'll see in the course of a top 10, when people are talking about how they finished in a tournament, with the exception of when they go to northern smallmouth waters and everybody just dominates on drop shots, then every other place in the country, there's a wide range of patterns and techniques available to catch them at the same time. It's just determining which is the most efficient way to catch the numbers and size in a mix there. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you guys. Thought that was an interesting study. I wish they'd do more like that. I think we could learn so much about bass if we had the ability to track them. I think we could learn more about bass than you could from, the highest technological advances we have in electronics or whatever. If you could just, watch or figure out where these bass go every single day and watch their movements. So anyway, I just want to share that with you guys. Hope you guys have a good weekend here. Appreciate tuning in, and we'll be back soon with another one. See you.